Good day, Mark. Welcome back. We're most excited about the second phase of your presentation, focusing on Jaimini and marriage. And I want to tell you, your first presentation has been very warmly received. Everyone has talked about the clarity, and that's marvelous. So let's continue, and please take the floor and teach us some more.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear that people felt it was clear. I always strive for clarity. Mm-hmm. And today, as we talked about last week, we focused on methods from the Parashari point of view. This week, we're going to focus on methods from the Jaimini point of view. But again, I want to emphasize the way in which I'm advocating the approach of using them together, right? This idea of the composite technique that I've spoken out, that Kay and Rao sort of pioneered. And so first I want to pull up a document that just talks about, and maybe I can enlarge it here. Can I enlarge it? Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, here I'm going to enlarge it. And what I want to do is just, first, I mentioned last week that if you're going to predict anything, it starts with having some predictive parameters, right? Mm-hmm. Some methodology. And so first I just want to walk through the methodology and then, illustrate it. So when we're looking to try to time marriage or relationship from the Jaimini point of view, the first thing we want to do is we want to mark the position of the Dharakaraka both in the birth chart and in the Navamsha. Dharakaraka, again, is the planet with the fewest degrees, and we designate it as the DK. But then also, Sthirakarkas, that is, natural significators, are used in the Jaimini system as well, along with the Rashi Dashas, and therefore we want to mark Venus as the natural significator of love and love relationships, and this would be both for men and women, okay? Mm-hmm. And so we want to mark its position also both in the birth chart and in the Navamsha. And then lastly, we've talked about how in the Jaimini system there are these things called padas, right? And so every house has a pada. One can think about it as being like a mirror image of that house, and that sign, that is the pada of some other house / sign, is going to be able to give the same kind of results to some degree as the house. So in other words, the seventh house, of course, signifies marriage and relationships. Well, the planet, or the sign, I should say, that is the seventh pada, whichever sign and house that is, this also is going to become eligible for giving this event when you run the period of that sign. It may have nothing to do with the seventh house, but that sign is going to be the pada of the seventh house. And as you'll see from some famous examples I'll show here, when a person runs that major period, that sign dasha, it can bring the event of marriage. So we want to mark these factors in the chart first before we try to time things in Jaimini. But then probably the most straightforward and easy and simple, and I like to even say elegant way in which marriage can be timed in the Jaimini system is this point number 1 here. That is, when you're running the periods and subperiods containing the Dharakaraka, or even just Venus, the natural significator of marriage. So if you're just running a sign containing the DK or containing Venus, that could make it eligible, right? Or a subperiod. Now, secondarily, a marriage can take place in the periods and subperiods of signs from where the DK falls in the seventh house or from where Venus falls in the seventh house. So we talked about before that how in the Jaimini system, a major way of using the sign-based dashas is whatever sign you're running, you use that as if it was the lagna, as if that was the first house. Well, if you run a period from where either the Dharakaraka or Venus is placed in the seventh from there, that period, and again, sub-period, becomes very eligible for bringing this event, okay? Mm-hmm. And so, and then also just if a planet, if you're running a sign that is the sign of the seventh house. So, in the case of George Bush, if you looked at when he got married, his lagna is Cancer, and Capricorn, therefore, is his seventh house. just after moving into his Capricorn period at the end of 1976, he met and married his future wife, Laura, in 1977, because Capricorn is simply the sign of his seventh house. Right? Not showing the chart, but just explaining that idea. Right? And so, there's a lot of parameters, but I'm going to just focus on the ones I've mentioned so far, not to confuse folks. And I'll start showing some illustration here, okay?
Okay.
So now I'm going to bring up another document. And I want to start out by showing a case study of my own, one in which I was fortunate enough to predict a person's marriage, a woman in this case, who had approached me, I believe it was in the year 2000. She was 52 years old at the time. She had been married previously, but had been divorced for a long time and was wondering if it might ever happen for her again. Again, it's just a very, very typical question that an astrologer runs into, right? Now, as I like to say, I'd rather be good than lucky. Or I'd rather be lucky than good. I said that backwards. That might have been a Freudian slip, but I meant to say I'd rather be lucky but good. And what I mean by that is that it's wonderful when someone approaches you with a question and then you look at the astrological factors and you can then tell them what they want to hear.
Yes.
It doesn't always work out that way. But this woman approached me asking about this question when she was running in Vimshotri Dasha, the major period of Mercury and the sub-period of Jupiter. So, you can just see here, Mercury is the seventh lord in the seventh house, right? Yeah. And then Jupiter is the first lord in the first house. And of course, they're in a mutual glance from each other, and they're 1/7 from each other. Mm-hmm. So it could hardly have been more apparent that this period and sub-period from the Vimshotri standpoint was going to be able to bring this event. And but of course, that's a fairly long period. And I was saying, before that, one thing I like about Jaimini is that the major periods are never more than 12 years, which means the sub-periods are never more than a year. And it helps you to, you might say, narrow the timing more. And to make a long story short, I overlapped the period of, think about Mercury, Jupiter, Venus. Mm-hmm. Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, right? Mercury's in the seventh house, Jupiter's in the seventh house. I mean, Jupiter's making a mutual aspect with those, and Venus is in. So that was the sequence in Vimshotri, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus. And I coordinated this with the major period of Sagittarius and the sub-period of Aries in the Jaimini system. Okay? Well, if you look at Sagittarius, there sits the Dharakaraka Jupiter, right? Mm-hmm. Now remember, we have to mark the Dharakaraka both in the birth chart and in the Navamsha. And if I show you her Navamsha, you'll see that there's Jupiter in Aries. So I was coordinating the period in Vimshotri of Mercury, Jupiter, Venus with the period of Sagittarius, Aries in Chara Dasha. And you can see again that Dharakaraka Jupiter is in Sagittarius in the birth chart. Dharakaraka Jupiter is in Aries in Navamsha. Mm-hmm. So again, mark the periods containing the DK either in the birth chart or in Navamsha. These signs become very eligible in their periods and sub-periods for bringing their events. Do you think that was clear, Phyllis? Any questions about that?
I think that was just beautiful, and that's a wonderful example, and I'm not above asking to borrow it.
Well, this is the methodology that I've used, that I had some success.
It worked beautiful. And so, it's clear, and I know that our viewers are going to have a better foundation, something solid to work on.
So now we'll look at some celebrity charts and celebrity marriages. People should, at least Americans, will probably recognize the name of Ben Affleck, a famous American movie star. He met his future wife, Jennifer Garner, on the set of a movie called Daredevil that they were doing, and they married subsequently. And for him, it was the major period of Sagittarius again. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, in this case, not only does Sagittarius contain Jupiter as his DK, but you'll note that Sagittarius is the seventh house. Mm-hmm. So now Sagittarius becomes doubly eligible. But now look at where Venus is. From Sagittarius, Venus will fall in the 7th house from there.
Yeah.
Now it becomes triply eligible.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very apparent from the Jaimini point of view that he was going to marry in his Sagittarius period, but then it becomes a question of which subperiod, because in this case, Sagittarius would have been a 12-year period.
Mm-hmm.
The most that any sign period can be in Charadasha. So it becomes a question of subperiod, and the subperiod turned out to be that of Taurus. Well, if you look at his Navamsha, you'll see that there is Dharakaraka Jupiter, which would have refined it to a year's period.
Mm-hmm.
Quite frankly, if you usually tell someone, well, you're going to get married within this year's period, they're satisfied with that. You can certainly try to narrow it down, but most people would be fairly satisfied with that. Right?
This never ceases to amaze me. You'd think after all these years, seeing another example would be boring, but it isn't. It's always so exciting to see the consistency and accuracy of these techniques.
Well, they do work, and I have the same feeling. I mean, it's always kind of just a sort of remarkable. Now, again, another Hollywood movie star. People should recognize the name Tim Robbins for that famous movie Shawshank Redemption. But when he was in a movie called Bull Durham, he starred in that movie with the movie star Susan Sarandon, and they had a very famous Hollywood romance and became a Hollywood couple for a long time. Now, this would have been in his it would have been in his Rahu-Venus period, which I talked about, or either Rahu-Venus or Venus-Rahu, I forget which. And I talked about how that period and subperiod in Vimshotri last time we spoke, how that could bring a fated love affair so often, which it certainly did in this case. But, in terms of Charadasha, it happened in the major period of Libra. Right? And so
the major period of what?
Libra.
Libra. Thank you.
Major period in Libra in Charadasha. And so what do you notice about Libra?
Well, the Dharakaraka is in Libra.
Right, exactly. It happened in the subperiod of Gemini. Now, put your finger on Gemini in Navamsha and see where Mercury, the Dharakaraka, goes. Use Gemini if it's
and
a
there
first.
It is in the 7th house they're from.
There it is in the 7th house. So it was in Libra, Gemini, that this very fated love affair that ended up into a marriage-like situation. They were with each other for a long time, had children together, never actually married, but very much a relationship-giving time for him. And then, it's easy to get the birth data, as I said, of Hollywood movie stars, so I use that a lot. But here we have the chart of Antonio Banderas, who he has Rahu and Venus in the 7th house. Right? And when he was running this period and subperiod, he was actually married, but then he did a movie with Melanie Griffith. They ended up getting involved and subsequently divorcing their spouses and marrying each other. So this was in, again, I don't remember whether it was Venus, Rahu, or Rahu, Venus, but it was one of those two. But as far as Charadasha, it was the major period of Sagittarius, subperiod of Libra. I suspect you immediately noticed that Sagittarius has the decayed Jupiter, right?
Yes.
Strong in its own sign. And here's a point. You see that his decayed Jupiter is with Saturn?
Mm-hmm.
He was considerably older than him.
She was?
He was older than him. Melanie Griffith was older than Antonio Banderas. I'm saying that his
I wanted to make sure I heard you correctly.
His Dharakaraka is conjunct Saturn, which could indicate that there's something about the spouse that is Saturn-like, in this case, older. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, that was the major period. The subperiod was Libra. Put your finger on Libra again. Where does Jupiter
go? There we go, with Jupiter.
That's
in
it.
the 7th.
So now come back to my parameter. Marriage can take place in the periods and subperiods of planets containing the decay or from where the decay falls 7th. Right? And
Good,
what we're.
good
That's what,
points. Good
that's
point.
what,
Good examples too.
so Marilyn Monroe, very famous marriage to the New York Yankee star Joe DiMaggio. This would have been way back in the 50s, but it was a very, very highly publicized marriage. Didn't last long, but very highly publicized marriage. And you see in the birth chart, if you find her DK, you'll see that it's Jupiter again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, as it turns out, she married in the Charadasha of Taurus, which of course has nothing to do with the DK here. But if you look in Navamsha, focus in on Taurus, first of all, you'll see that it contains Venus strong in its own sign.
Yes.
And then what?
The DK is 7 from it.
You're catching on, Phyllis.
Oh, finally, there's hope for me.
You're catching on. No, that's exactly right. So she married Joe DiMaggio in Taurus with Venus, natural Karaka, in that sign in Navamsha, and then Jupiter falling in the 7th from that sign. Now, certainly...
Very good examples. Very good examples.
Well, again, it was seeing these type of things that made me confident about predicting on their basis. Okay? And so here we have the chart of the very famous Indian Rabindranath Tagore, first Indian to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. And he married in the major period of Gemini. Major period of Gemini contains his DK.
Spot on.
Definitely.
Subperiod was, let's see, what was the subperiod? Aries. I'm showing you Navamsha now.
And there we have
Mars and
Venus.
But not just Mars. Venus strong in its own sign. Right?
Yes, Venus and Mars in this.
Natural Karaka.
Yeah.
George Harrison met and married his second wife, not his first wife, but his second wife in the major period of Pisces, sub-period of Leo. Now, here Venus is the Darakaraka. Of course, it's also the natural Darakaraka. Pisces is a no-brainer. But then which sub-period? See Navamsha, sub-period of Leo.
And there it is, sitting in the 8th house. How long was the marriage?
Don't focus on the idea that it's the 8th house, okay? Just focus on the idea that it's a sign containing, in this case, Venus, who's also in this chart the Darakaraka.
Okay.
So again, marries in the major period of a sign containing that, and the sub-period of the birth chart, and then the sign containing that in Navamsha. This is why I said at the beginning we have to mark these places both in the birth chart and in the Navamsha, right?
Good.
And then we've got...
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Then we've got George Lucas.
The mind goes to the house.
Naturally. We have George Lucas here, Star Wars fame, and he had his first marriage. Where is this? He had his first marriage in Cancer, Taurus. Major period of Cancer.
You lift this up.
Major period of Cancer, sub-period of Taurus.
Okay, AK in there. All right, in sub-period. Okay.
So sub-period's obvious because there's DK Sun right there.
Yeah.
Right? But in order to understand, well, Cancer also would get the aspect of the DK. This is Rashi Drishti aspect.
Rashi Drishti, got that.
Now that's not as a strong an indication. It can make a sign eligible, but it's not as strong an indication. But if you see Navamsha, then it becomes clear. If you use Cancer as a lagna, what happens to the Sun Darakaraka? Goes into Capricorn. Goes into the 7th from there. Right? And then, Barbara Streisand married Elliot Gould at a very young age. when she was running Taurus, Taurus.
And there's a DK.
Contains her DK. Nothing could hardly be simpler. Now, Cary Grant actually had many marriages, but the one that lasted the longest happened in Capricorn Cancer.
That's certainly not surprising with his AK in Capricorn in the D1. Where was the DK in the D9 for him?
Well, in this case, I mean, we can look at that. In this case, you don't really need it because both the period and the subperiod get satisfied by Capricorn Cancer. DK,
I see. Okay.
DK
So it's not necessary to always have that second support. If we have solid support in the D1, we've got it.
In this case, in terms of both period and subperiod, because the major period contains the DK, and then the subperiod, all those planets in Capricorn fall in the 7th from there, including the DK.
Mm-hmm.
If you use Cancer,
Make that really clear.
Of course, these signs are 1/7 from each other, which brings up another parameter. When you're just running the period and subperiod of two signs 1/7 from each other, I've seen this make a period and subperiod eligible as well, although again, that's more on the weaker side.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And just parenthetically, his last marriage came in Capricorn, Capricorn. In other words, period and subperiod of the sign in the Rashi containing the DK. So I want to skip ahead, just some quick other examples here. Gwyneth Paltrow, another Hollywood movie star, both married and had children in her Virgo period.
Mm-hmm.
DK, Mars in Virgo, PK planet with the 5th highest degrees, that is in the Jaimini system, like unto the 5th Lord. So here she enters Virgo and she marries and has children because it's DK with the PK. And I think I'd shown the chart of Catherine Zeta-Jones maybe earlier. Her Virgo period was quite remarkable from a lot of different standpoints. Notice that it's the 10th house of her birth chart. Mm-hmm. It contains her AMK and her AK, which, according to how Rao teaches Jaimini, it forms a very dramatic Raja Yoga.
Raja Yoga, yeah.
AMK is a real career indicator, and you can see that it's just a degree or so away from its highest point of exaltation, so very strong. Okay. So it was during this period when she ran her Virgo period that she became this big international star. But she also married Michael Douglas, another Hollywood actor, during this period. And so what happens if you use Virgo as a lagna? What happens in the 7th house from there?
The DK, the moon is sitting there.
The DK.
Yeah.
But she also had children during this period. Who's the PK in this chart? Who's the PK?
Mars, got it.
Mars is the PK. And then Jupiter is the natural giver of children, right? Mm-hmm. So Virgo contains Jupiter, the natural giver of children. It's also Rashi Drishti, aspected by the PK of this chart. Mm-hmm. And the subperiod in which she had her first child was the subperiod of Sagittarius, containing her PK.
These examples are just a joy to see.
Yeah.
They are very clear and will support, and are supporting me.
Well, I have to say, this is why I say that I love the Jaimini system, because oftentimes events can come out in a very simple and elegant way. Mm-hmm. I wrote an article about Charadasha called Elegant Simplicity, and this is what I was referring to. But I have to say here, it isn't always like this. We
know that, but it's so wonderful when it is.
It is, and sometimes
it's studying.
And a good number of times it is, Phyllis, and I've predicted innumerable times, just using these same sort of approaches. So, here's the man she married, who was also quite a bit older than she was. He married in his major period of Aries, sub-period of Aquarius. Right?
Okay, let's see.
Now think about Aries. What happens in the 7th house from Aries?
The Darakarika.
Not just the
Venus.
Darakarika, but Venus in its own sign.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sub-period was Aquarius. And if you put your finger on Aquarius, now what wait a second. Maybe I'm getting confused here. Hold on. It was
Whoops.
Aries Aquarius.
Aries, Aquarius, okay.
So now I'm showing you an example of how a sub-period can become eligible based on getting the aspect of the DK and or Venus. Because from using Rashi Dristi, you'll see that Venus, the DK, aspects onto Aquarius.
Okay.
But again, you'd want to be coordinating all of this with, other dasha systems to, sort of confirm how this could happen.
Ooh, I'm getting dizzy.
Well, I want to jump ahead here because, I don't want to belabor a point that much. I want to go to the idea of the way in which Darapada, that is, Pada of the 7th house, can also give this event. So Albert Einstein married his first wife in January of 2003. It was the Chara Dasha of Aries. Okay? Chara Dasha of Aries. And so actually, if you look at it, who's his Darakaraka here? Darakaraka is the sun, right?
Yes.
Darakaraka is the sun. Aries has nothing to do with being the sign of the Darakaraka or from where the Darakaraka falls 7th. And it's not Rashi Dristi aspecting Aries. Venus falls in the same category. In other words, it's not showing any of the eligibility that we've seen in the other examples, right?
Right.
But now, can you calculate the Pada of the 7th house?
It becomes Aries. It becomes the 11th house when you take the Lord Jupiter.
Well, first of all, you have it exactly right. The seventh Lord is Jupiter. You count how many signs that's gone. It's all in the zodiac. 3. You count 3 from there, and you come to Aries. The idea that it being the 11th house is not what's significant here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just said that.
Well, no, I'm just saying what I'm looking at is that the fact that Aries is the Pada of the 7th house. Right? And as such, it becomes eligible. Now, the sub-period when he actually married, we noticed that his Darakaraka was the sun, right?
Yes.
And he married in the sub-period. It was either Cancer or Capricorn. I'm not sure which. In either way, I think maybe it was Capricorn, in which case from Capricorn, Darakaraka's sun falls in the 7th from there. So major period of Aries, sub-period of Capricorn. Aries was eligible in the birth chart because it's the Pada of the 7th house. Capricorn becomes eligible in Navamsha because Darakaraka's sun falls in the 7th from there. Right? And then, Mia Farrow had her famous relationship with Woody Allen. That started in her Pisces period. Wait a second, make sure I have this. Or, I'm sorry, in her Leo period. And again, if you kind of use the different sort of predictive parameters we were using before, none of them really apply to Leo, okay? But now calculate the Pada of her 7th house.
Her D7 is in Leo.
That's it. And this is when this major relationship came into her life in the Pada of the 7th house. What I'm showing here is how the Darapada, Pada of the 7th house, becomes eligible for bringing relationship or marriage into a person's life. Okay? James, Barbara Streisand married for a second time in her in July 1st of 1998. I'm saying here it was her Scorpio major period. Now, can you see one thing that makes Scorpio very obviously eligible for bringing this event?
Well, the DK, Saturn, is opposing it.
Well, it's falling in the 7th from it.
Just a second. Right.
No, you got it. It's falling in the 7th from it, right?
I didn't say 7th. I said opposing.
That's okay. And then if you calculate her Pada of the 7th house,
is the 9th house, and again, it's opposing.
Well, it was Scorpio when they married. And
Well,
Scorpio,
so it should have been.
Scorpio is her Dharpada.
Dharpada. Yeah.
Because Virgo is their 7th lord. If you count how many signs, it's gone from there as Aries. You count 8 more from there. You come to Scorpio. She's married in the sign of her Dharpada. But also from there, DK Saturn falls in the 7th, so it becomes eligible twice over.
Yes.
Okay. Now I'm showing the chart of Donald Trump. Okay. You see Donald Trump's chart?
Oh yeah, I see it. Okay.
So now he married his first wife, Ivanka, I should say. No, Ivana, that's his daughter. Ivana, he married his first wife, Ivana, in the major period of Sagittarius, sub-period of Aquarius. Focus on the major period first. Who is the Dharpada of his chart? The Lord is Saturn, right?
Sun.
The Lord is Saturn. You count 6 from there because Saturn goes to Cancer from there, right?
Okay, it's Sag.
And then you count 6 more, and you come to Sagittarius, his Dharpada. That's the major period that he marries. Sub-period is Aquarius. What strikes you about Aquarius?
7th house.
7th house?
7th house.
Now look at who his DK and Venus, where are they located? They're located over there in Cancer, right? So they're going to aspect onto Aquarius, Rashi Drishti.
Both of them.
So now Aquarius becomes doubly eligible because it's both the 7th house of the birth chart and also gets the Rashi Drishti of both the DK and Venus, natural Karaka.
Mark, I would like to ask a question here because I think some viewers would like to know how you decide whether it is Rahu to use or Saturn to use when we're looking at the 7th house to find the D7.
So that's a good question. When we're in K and Rao's calculation of Charadasha, and I believe what's given in Parashara Hora again, I think you're referring to the fact that Aquarius has a dual rulership of both Saturn and
and I think the viewers need some clarity on that.
Okay, well, I'm going to give it to them. But I was just going to say that Scorpio has the dual rulership of Mars and Ketu. When calculating padas, we only use Saturn for Aquarius and Mars for Scorpio.
So this is K.N. Rao's suggestion.
Well, it's his method.
Method, whatever. Because there is another method where you look at the strengths of the planets.
No, I'm well aware, Phyllis, but as I've made very clear, I'm doing Jaimini according to K and Rao.
Please, I'm not arguing. I just want it to be clear for the students, so I'm trying to think of how I would be if this was the first time I was hearing you.
All right, very good. But, we can also go further here. And yes, his Dara Karaka goes to the 12th house, and it's with the GK planet that is like unto the 6th Lord. And, of course, he's been married and divorced 3 times.
Yes.
All right.
We won't go down that road today.
Well, 50% of marriages end up in divorce in the U.S., so it's a very, very common thing. Okay.
Well, we may have something coming up in the not too distant future that will address that. So here's a little promise that something's coming.
Okay. And now, Prince Charles had his very famous and later disastrous marriage with Diana. And again, I want to point out that one of the simplest ways that a sign becomes eligible for bringing marriage is when it's just the sign associated with the seventh house of the birth chart. And he married in his Capricorn major period. So, it just, now there was you have to then refine it down to sub-period and coordinate that with Vimshotri and also other dashas as I was showing last time. But right now I'm just focusing on these parameters. So, it's more complex than that, but I think for our viewership, if they're hearing this for the first time, it's probably overwhelming right now. But, just to go back and review, just go back to the very beginning of the document here and just review some of the parameters that we have focused on. Actually, what I need to do is pull up my other document, which I will do. So what we were focusing on is marking the position of the DK in Venus, both in the birth chart and the Navamsha, and marking the Pada of the seventh house. And we were identifying periods and subperiods that contained the DK, both in the birth chart and in Navamsha, or Venus in the birth chart and Navamsha. It's stronger if it's the DK, but Venus alone in a sign or falling seventh from a sign can also indicate this, right? And then we were looking at periods and subperiods of sign from where Venus or the DK would fall in the seventh. Mm-hmm. And either as a major period lord or as a sub-period lord. And we saw many, many examples of those, right? Mm-hmm. And then we were looking at signs that were the Pada. This is number 6 here. Signs where the Pada of the seventh house was running, and how that made a sign eligible for bringing marriage. We saw that in the case of Albert Einstein, in the case of Mia Farrow, and in the case of Donald Trump. Okay, and we even saw a case with Cary Grant where the period and subperiod of two signs that are just 1/7 from each other. Mm-hmm. That also can make it. In his case, that axis also contained his DK Mercury, which made it even more eligible. But so these are the primary ways and the periods that we're trying to identify that can bring this. But I want to emphasize again and go back to my original example. I'm always coordinating these Jaimini periods and subperiods with periods in Vimshotri. At a minimum, I'm typically using another planetary dasha, Yogini, that I mentioned last week, and then actually using another sign-based dasha of Jaimini, so that I'm actually using 4 dashas to try to get that lineup. I explained that analogy of a Las Vegas slot machine and all the symbols lining up, right? Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. That's so important to do that, to get an answer for more than one place.
You want to get confluence because with these parameters, I will acknowledge that a lot of periods become eligible, right? Mm-hmm. Which ones are actually going to bring the relationship, bring the marriage? And of course, as a final step, we want to coordinate transits that support this. So both the dashas have to be right, the transit has to be right, and this is where we see the event happen. And it's been this methodology that I was taught by K.N. Rao, and it's been this methodology that I've had success with.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have done a very good job of clearly demonstrating the points you've raised here. And with these 2 presentations that you've given us, I do believe our readers are going to have a whole new way of looking at charts and doing research themselves. So the more they can validate this, the better it is.
Oh, of course, and what everybody does, of course, if they've had marriage or at least had relationships, they apply these parameters to.
Oh yes, that's the first thing we do.
And sometimes they'll find them working very well, and sometimes they won't, because I said this isn't the total picture, and there's more to it than that. I'm just trying to, keep it simple for people who are hearing this for the first time. But you will find that these parameters actually do apply quite a bit.
Yes, definitely. Marc, thank you very much for what you've given us. I appreciate this, and I know many other people are going to as well.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
I
Thank you
hope
so
to
much.
talk to you again soon.
Okay, bye for now then.